Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, the Beauty Myth. Learn the beauty secrets of the goddess next door in this action-packed Isis series adventure. Get Isis, the Beauty Myth at online booksellers everywhere today.
Hollywood Historical Women in Crisis. One of my viewers wanted me to do another installment in the Hollywood Historical Women in Crisis series. And for this installment in the Hollywood Historical Women in Crisis series, I'm going to be talking about legendary singer Phyllis Hyman. Now, Phyllis Hyman was a naturally gifted singer with all the talent to become as successful as her 1980s contemporaries, Anita Baker and Whitney Houston. Unfortunately, a series of demons that plagued Phyllis Hyman led to her not being able to actualize her potential as a singer, and instead of her going on to become a superstar on the level of Whitney Houston and Anita Baker, Phyllis Hyman became a footnote in soul music history and a woman in crisis. Now, Phyllis Hyman was the oldest of 7 children born to Philip Hyman, a World War II veteran, and Louise Hyman, a waitress who worked at a local nightclub. Now, she grew up in the St. Clair village in the south section of Pittsburgh after living in Philadelphia for some time, and lived with her 6 siblings. And as Phyllis Hyman was growing up, she discovered her gift for singing one day as she was singing along with the radio, and her sister told her that she was better than the woman who was singing on the radio. And after discovering her gift for singing, Phyllis Hyman decided to join the music group in high school, and this is where her music teacher began coaching her on developing her voice. And as she wound up getting coached to develop her voice, she then got a scholarship for a music school. And she attended that music school for 1 year before she wound up dropping out and joining a national tour with a music band, The New Direction, in 1971. And when that band wound up disbanding, she wound up joining the band All the People and worked with another local group, the Hondo Beat, and even made an appearance in the film Lenny, which I believe was about the comedian Lenny Bruce. And she also did a stint with her own band that she created called Phyllis Hyman and the PH Factor. And in 1975, Sid Mara and former Epic Records promoter Fred Frank discovered her and signed her to a Roadshow Records Desert Moon imprint. And around that time, this is where Phyllis Hyman wound up taking a job on a cruise ship. And when she took that job on a cruise ship, this is where she wound up meeting her future husband, Larry Alexander. And when she met Larry Alexander, she met him because he was singing and disturbing her sleep. And as she came out to go find out who this was, this is where she wound up meeting her future husband. And as she met her future husband working on that cruise ship, that's when both singers came up with a plan to move to New York to further develop Phyllis Hyman's and his music career. And this is where Phyllis Hyman started to go out here and started to really start to develop her music career. And as she was working in clubs, she was discovered by Norman Connors, who was laying tracks for You Are My Starship, and went out here and got Phyllis Hyman and decided to ask her to go out here and sign up for his for Buddha Records. And as she signed up for Buddha Records, this is where she went out here and had a big hit on an album doing a remake of the stylistic Betcha by Golly Wow. Now, as Phyllis Hyman was out here on Buddha Records, what happened was she was still out here developing her first solo album, which was released. And after this, Arista Records bought out Buddha. And when Arista Records bought out Buddha, this is where Phyllis Hyman became discovered by legendary music producer Clive Davis. Now, Clive Davis had a plan to make Phyllis Hyman into a pop star. However, Phyllis Hyman did not want to submit to Clive Davis's leadership and direction, and this basically would start laying the foundation for the beginning of the decline of Phyllis Hyman's life, and really started accelerating her on the road to becoming a woman in crisis. Now, Phyllis Hyman basically had a plan to go out here and direct her own career, and didn't want to go out here and submit to the leadership and guidance of Clive Davis. And because she didn't want to submit to the leadership and guidance of Clive Davis, she wanted to go out here and continue making music in the genre of soul, and also wanted to explore going out on Broadway. And because Phyllis Hyman wanted to go out here and start setting a course for her own career, this is where Phyllis Hyman started to think that she was moving her career forward in one way, but she was actually putting herself on a road where she would not be able to actualize her potential as a singer. Now, Phyllis Hyman wanted to go out here and make her own style of music, and wanted to go out here and do things her own way. And what she wanted to do after working with Clive Davis and clashing with Clive Davis was do a musical on Broadway called Sophisticated Ladies, which was a tribute to the late Duke Ellington. And as she performed in this musical, she did get a lot of acclaim and a Tony Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress in a Musical, and even won a Theatre World Award for Best Newcomer. Unfortunately, this whole gig as related to Sophisticated Ladies caused a lot of friction between herself and Clive Davis, and this basically led to her putting a pause on her recording career. And this also led to her running into several issues as related to her career, because as she was out here, she was, again, still getting gigs, but never really getting that exposure that she was supposed to get. And one of the things that led to her having a major hindrance to her career was she originally recorded the song for Never Say Never Again, a big James Bond movie in 1983. Unfortunately, there was a lawsuit with the person who wrote the score, and this led to him having the rights to the song, so they had to create a brand new version of the song with a different singer, and this really caused Phyllis Hyman not to get a lot of exposure as related to elevating her star as a singer. Now, as Phyllis Hyman was out here having issues with Clive Davis, what she started to do was go out here and start to have issues with her marriage, because as she was refusing to submit to the authority of Clive Davis, she was possibly, as her career was rising and her husband's was not really rising at the same time, because her husband, basically Larry Alexander, wanted to be a star as well. But because he saw Phyllis getting the big contracts, I believe what happened was he got extremely insecure, and this led to a lot of friction between Phyllis Hyman and her husband. And because she had issues with submitting to the authority of men as related to her career and her relationship, what happened is both of those relationships wound up deteriorating, and this basically led to her winding up divorcing her husband, Larry Alexander, in 1982, and it also eventually led to the complete collapse of her musical career at Arista Records, because at that point, this is where Clive Davis just decided to end his contract with Phyllis Hyman in 1983. And in that same year that he ended his contract with Phyllis Hyman because he was tired of clashing with her, this is where he decided to go out here and sign her contemporary, Whitney Houston. Now, I believe that that was a major blow to Phyllis Hyman, because this was the biggest opportunity of her career, and this is where she started to see her life go into a major state of decline, because all the stresses of her marriage deteriorating, all the stresses of her career not really reaching its potential. This is what I believe led to Phyllis Hyman going out here and starting to abuse drugs and alcohol. And as she also abused drugs and alcohol, she also began overeating. And the statuesque 6'1" woman who had the beauty of a supermodel was dealing with a lot of issues with her weight and also dealing with issues as related to her mental health. Now, Phyllis Hyman, as she was dealing with all of these issues, wound up in a really bad state. And as she wound up in this bad state as related to her career going into a major decline, this is where she wound up at a point where she was again abusing alcohol, abusing drugs, and also getting involved with lots of men. And instead of her getting involved with men of character like her husband, what she started to do was have lots of relationships with Pookies and Ray Rays. And as she was having these relationships with these Pookies and Ray Rays, this basically led to Phyllis Hyman having to deal with a lot of serious personal issues as her life went into decline. And as her life went into decline, she was looking to she hit rock bottom and tried to reinvent herself. And as she tried to reinvent herself, she went out here and got a brand new look, which was one where she wore fez hats and big padded shoulder pantsuits. And as she was doing this, she went out here and started going out here and doing new records, and also went out here and appeared in films like School Days and The Kill Reflex, and also went out here and was starting to try to rise again, and eventually made a big album, which was the biggest of her career, The Prime of My Life. And as she made this record, it basically had her first Billboard Top 100 hit, Don't Want to Change the World, and she went on to try to continue building herself up as a star. Unfortunately, many of the issues Phyllis Hyman had dealt with as related to her low self-esteem and low self-worth basically took a toll on her. And I believe one of the things that led to her low self-esteem taking a toll on her was because she saw contemporaries like Whitney Houston and Anita Baker becoming bigger stars than she did. And this basically exacerbated things as related to her situation with her mental health, where she wound up having bipolar depression and was taking medication for it, but the medication didn't make her feel good. And this basically led to her winding up making one suicide attempt, I believe in 1990 or so, and then trying to come back from that. But as she was dealing with this depression, she was trying to deal with this whole issue of bipolar depression. And what happened was she wound up having ups and downs, where she wound up on a vicious cycle of self-medicating with alcohol, drugs, and men. And as she got into that vicious cycle, she started to get into a dark place when she started to get into her 40s. Now, Phyllis Hyman, as she started to get older, and I believe started to see her star starting to fade, this is where she started going into a dark place. And this is where she started talking more and more about death, more and more about suicide, and more about looking to take her life, because she really, I believe what happened with her is that she saw that she was never going to achieve the success of her contemporaries of the 1980s, Anita Baker or Whitney Houston, and basically felt a lot of self-loathing as related to the whole state of her career. Now, I believe what happened with Phyllis Hyman is that she didn't really see how she basically was her own worst enemy, because Phyllis Hyman had a pattern of going out here, and once she got her success, getting in her own way. And as she got in her own way, I believe subconsciously Phyllis Hyman didn't believe that she deserved that success. So what she would do is do something to undermine her success. Now, this is something that many black women participate in, and I go in depth on this in my book, Why 70% of Black Women Are Single. Many black women suffer from deep self-hatred, and because they suffer from deep self-hatred as related to being a black woman, what they do is go out here and sabotage their success because they don't believe they are worthy of it. And that all has to do with an issue of with these women not loving themselves and believing that they deserve the best. And I believe that Phyllis Hyman suffered from this whole issue of low self-esteem, and this issue of low self-esteem, I believe, was the main reason why Phyllis Hyman never really got to rise to the level of her contemporaries, Anita Baker or Whitney Houston, and become a superstar on that level. And while men like Clive Davis could see all of the great potential that Phyllis Hyman had as a singer, she couldn't see the greatness in her own music, and she couldn't see the greatness in herself. And the minute that she started to rise to a level of accomplishing that kind of success, what happened was Phyllis Hyman's low self-esteem would subconsciously kick in, and she would start to sabotage herself, and she would sabotage herself as related to any success that she got, whether it be with her husband or with her or their musical executives like Clive Davis. Whenever Phyllis Hyman was able to achieve some level of success, she would go out here and find a way to sabotage it because she didn't believe she deserved it. And this is something that plagues many successful, educated black women. The minute that they start to rise in their careers, they would undermine themselves, not being able to actualize their potential because of their fear of getting any success, and also their fear of believing that they deserve any of that success. And this would be the thing that would undermine those women. And this is the thing that undermined Phyllis Hyman as she struggled with issues as related to drugs and alcohol, and also struggled with issues as with her weight, because Phyllis Hyman went from looking like a supermodel to ballooning to 300 pounds at one time. And this all again took a toll on Phyllis Hyman's already unstable mental health, with her dealing with bipolar depression. And with Phyllis Hyman getting into her 40s, she possibly felt like she was never going to be able to achieve any of that great success of her contemporaries like Whitney Houston or Anita Baker. And this basically led to her going out here and pondering suicide. And eventually on June 30th, 1995, a couple of days before her 46th birthday, this is where Phyllis Hyman decided that she was tired of living in this world. And as she decided that she was tired of living in this world, this is where she wound up mixing the drug Tunio and vodka together to take her life. And this is where she was found unconscious in her Manhattan apartment at 2:00 p.m. because she told them, the people who at the Apollo, to come and wake her up so that she could do the show. But instead of her being able to do the show, they found her unconscious in her apartment, and she wound up dying at St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital, leaving a suicide note saying that she was tired. Those of you that I love know who you are. May God bless you. This is the note that Phyllis Hyman wound up leaving, and as she left this earth, she thought she would find peace that she wouldn't have here on earth. But the main reason why Phyllis Hyman sadly wound up taking her life was because she did not love being Phyllis Hyman. She did not love herself, and she did not find peace being an entertainer. She did not find peace in being herself. And because she did not find peace in being the woman that had all of this success, sadly, Phyllis Hyman wound up passing away. And as she wound up passing away, we lost one of the most gifted black singers of the 1980s. And the saddest part about Phyllis Hyman's story is that she never got to see how great a musician she was, or actualize her potential to be on the level of her contemporaries like Whitney Houston and Anita Baker, and even ones that came after her, Mariah Carey. Phyllis Hyman had a gifted gift for singing, a beautiful voice, and sadly could not see her own beauty. And because she could not see her own beauty, she could not learn to love music, the music that she made, and she couldn't learn to enjoy anything about any of the work that she put together. And sadly, because Phyllis Hyman didn't love herself and didn't love the music she produced or the success that she had, and this is the reason why Phyllis Hyman went from becoming a great woman on the potential of being one of the greatest musicians of the 1980s to winding up becoming a footnote who became a woman in crisis. Now, if you want to learn more about what leads to women like Phyllis Hyman winding up with them becoming lost on their quest to have it all, you can pick up my book, The Woman Crisis, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find The Woman Crisis at other online booksellers like Smashware's The iBookstore, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, and Target. And if you'd like to see me do another video on another Hollywood historical woman in crisis, you can send a donation to the PayPal, the Patreon, or the Cash App. And if I know something about that woman in crisis, I will make that video for you. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available in paperback and Kindle, All About Marilyn. Learn all about the struggles of a faded former teen sitcom star in this absolutely fabulous 5-star screenplay. Get All About Marilyn in paperback and Kindle on Amazon.com today.
Now available in paperback. From the author of the critically acclaimed book, The Man Crisis, comes The Woman Crisis. Learn why so many women have become lost in their quest to have it all in The Woman Crisis. Get your copy of The Woman Crisis in paperback at Amazon.com and online booksellers today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.